need a change in the media, we need a change in politics, we need a change in education, we need a change in the workplace, we need a change in all of it.
Hello, I'm Evelina Chirica and I welcome you to The Social Post, a podcast that addresses social issues, bringing forward conversations much needed in a turbulent world. From the effects the pandemic has had on education around the world to the future of work, this podcast brings you matters that shape our debates in society. The tragic death of Sarah Everard has saddened an entire country. The 33-year-old who disappeared in London at the beginning of March has sparked a nation's anger, and women across the country took to social media to discuss their own experiences of catcalling, harassment and assault. Today I'm discussing about women's safety with Pam Lowe, academic at Aston University and expert on women's reproductive and sexual health and feminist theories, and Chris Green, the founder of White Ribbon UK.
I got tons of soul on my true collective ball. Famous, so famous, number one, desirable. I do what I want, when I want, and how I want it. Leave you with the one in the air, that's how I roll. I got tons of soul on my true collective ball. Famous, so famous, number one, desirable. I do what I want, when I want, and how I want it. Leave you with the one in the air, that's how I roll. This is me, I'm so royal.
Women have been objectified, abused, harassed, raped for decades now. It is a tragical event like the death of Sarah Everard, a lesson that will be learned by the society. Was it a wake-up call?
I mean, I'd really like to think it was a wake-up call, but, we've seen, I'm quite old, and these events have, I've seen them happen in the past and been a mass public outcry and then very little change afterwards. So I really hope this time will be better, but I'm not sure that it will be, sadly. I think that the problem is it's very ingrained, misogyny and sexism, and we need wholesale culture shift, and focusing on just perpetrators is just not going to make the difference. I think we really need to do something about the way we organise the entire society.
What can we do?
I mean, I think there's a number of things that we can do. First of all, obviously, we need to think about all areas of sexism because they're all interrelated. So, if we look at, literature for small children, we still see sexist stereotypes. We still see gender roles being confined, and we still see the objectification of really young girls. The pink princesses, let's put them on the pedestal. So from a very, very early age, and in fact, sometimes now prenatally, in terms of the things like the gender reveal parties, we're predestined these, the repetition of the harmful stereotypes that leads to this sort of thing, being perpetuated. I mean, obviously, perpetrators are like this are very rare in terms of, a murder in the public sphere. But the everyday sexism is related to the everyday violence that women suffer. And most of this happens, of course, in the home and from people that women know, from partners, from husbands, from, close friends. Those are the people that, carry out so much of the violence against women. And, we need to change the whole thing. And if we narrow down just on one aspect rather than the whole picture, I'm not sure that we will get anywhere.
We have been taught from an early age that there is a power difference between men and women, that is okay to use certain language, behavior. Why is that?
So, I mean, I would argue, because obviously my background's in issues around reproductive health, that's where my academic research is. And I think fundamentally this comes down to the fact that if you go back centuries, and these issues do go back centuries, the way to ensure that in the children that you were going to pass on your property to, were yours, was to control the bodies and behaviour of women. So, for centuries, women have been confined, their behaviours have been more controlled, because it's all about controlling who has sexual access to women. And that is, that has, as I say, this is, centuries old, and it's been ingrained. And we still think in those terms, even though that might not be a conscious thought anymore. It still comes down to the fact that we expect different behaviours from women, and we expect them to behave in more, modest and, terms in a range of different scenarios. We expect women's behaviour to be constrained, and for them to constrain themselves for the benefits of men. And for me, it all comes down to the fact that if you want a social group to continue, whether that's a family, whether it's a nation, or whether it's a community, you have to control the bodies and behaviour of women, because that is how to control who is and who isn't born into a social group. And for me, that's where the behaviour started, and that's why it's such a broad issue that we need to challenge a huge range of sectors.
Why do men think women feel better or are happy when they are complimented, as they call it, by men that they don't know they don't want to interact with?
Because culturally, that's what men are encouraged to believe. Women are objectified in all sorts of ways across society. Whether it's through advertising, through even dramas, sort of like, it's how many times do you watch a program and women are undressed and men are dressed in a scene, and there's no reason for necessarily women to be, there's no dramatic reason for that to happen. As a society, it's ingrained that women are on display, women are available to be looked at, and that gives men the right to make those decisions, because that is the culture that we live in. Men are the lookers and the women are the looked at, and that's how society currently functions. And it's multi-leveled and ingrained in all sorts of areas.
How can men help here in this conversation around women's safety and misogyny and gender power?
So men have got to look at their own position. They've got to think through the behaviours that they are, performing themselves, but they've also got to challenge other men, right? Too much of this is dismissed. Oh, well, that's not really serious. That's just a joke. That's just locker room banter. How many times have we heard this? And men need to get better at saying, do you know what? This is unacceptable. And we shouldn't be doing this anymore, and that's what needs to happen. Film producers need to think, actually, do we really need to objectify women as the way we objectify men? Do we really need, all crime TV to be based on young women who get murdered, which seems to be quite a lot of it, So all of these things need to happen. So everybody has an individual role to play, but also we need to do this collectively, because we need to join the dots.
According to the Office for National Statistics, police recorded crime data show an increase in offences flagged as domestic abuse related during the coronavirus pandemic.
As I said earlier, I think the problem is the focus on the public sphere, walking alone at night, is completely misplaced, right? Actually, when you're walking in the streets at night, women are far safer than men. Men are much more likely to be attacked in public spaces than women are. The real danger comes from the home. And I think that is also a misunderstanding of the crime, of what actually happens. And I think that is a message that we need to get over to everybody as well. You are much more likely as a woman to be attacked by someone you know. And actually walking home late at night on your own, you're probably safer than you are if you ask somebody, an acquaintance, to walk you home. Sad but true, but actually you're more dangerous. It's statistically more dangerous to ask to be accompanied home than to walk home yourself. And I think that not connecting those dots, what happens in the home and what happens in public space, is why we're not actually getting through in terms of actually defeating this issue.
And
But
domestic violence as well has gone up during the lockdown.
yes, it absolutely has. And that was, and there's lots of people cheering right now about, oh, let's all work from home. Well, actually, we need to think about that, because being at work is sometimes the safest place for women to be. And I do worry about the level of control that could possibly start to increase if employers start to give more flexibility, and then women are more confined to their homes. We're already seeing a whole element around tech abuse. So, things like, Ring doorbells, and Alexa, are used to control women in the home. So even if the perpetrator is not in the house with you, you're still under surveillance. And I think we need to think very carefully about, the rollout of the Internet of Things, and the difference that it might make for women's safety.
Domestic abuse is a hidden crime, and many cases will not enter criminal justice process as they are not reported to the police. Many will say that we need laws and policies, a strong women's civil society movement, but what we actually need to do is to teach men and young boys how to listen and respect.
Ignorance will never see. No, wasn't it for me? Why don't you just let it be? I gave you 1, 2, and 3. Time stop wasting my good. Was you not on your knees? Wasn't it for me?
Chris, you are the founder of White Ribbon UK, a leading charity that wants to end the culture of men violence against women. What's the story behind the charity and what made you get involved?
The story behind the charity is I was an academic in a university. I had some spare time and I had been involved in what's loosely called anti-sexist men's politics years ago, and thought I wanted to do something similar. And I thought about starting a magazine. I'd been involved in a magazine collective before, which was called A Magazine for Changing Men, Achilles' Heel it was called. And then I thought, no, that only goes to a couple of thousand people, most of whom all think like me anyway. What's the point? And so I looked and I saw the White Ribbon campaign in Canada, which appears to be getting mass involvement and mass engagement, and then discovered that White Ribbon organisations were operating in a number of countries around the world. So I founded White Ribbon UK because I thought it was an important area to be involved in. And I vaguely knew that violence against women was an issue. I had no idea of the extent of the daily violences against women. And over 15, 16 years, I've gradually become more and more involved. And you can never stop once you're on this journey, because, if you change one person's life, you might save a life. And our particular remit is to engage with men to change men's behaviour. And now we have 60,000 men who've signed our pledge. And of course, someone would say, well, that's useless. Why isn't it 600,000? Why isn't it 6 million? Why isn't it 30 million? But you could also, on the other hand, say that's a start. Men who have signed the promise never to commit, never to engage, and equally important, never to remain silent about men's violences against women and girls. And that's why it's really important to keep talking about the issue, because so many men would say, oh, I didn't know anything about it, or I didn't know it was such an issue. And we don't want to give men that excuse not to be active, not to be challenging their own behaviour and the behaviour of their colleagues at work, their relatives and their friends in every way. And you mentioned that we work against a culture of men's violence, and that's really important as well. We are not just trying to challenge the domestic abuse of 1 in 4 women will experience in their lifetime. We're not just trying to challenge the abuse of sexual assault, which at least 1 in 4 women experience in their lifetime. We want to, if you like, join in with shouting about the issues which people have got involved in when people are talking about everyone's invited. The website, which now has 15,500 testimonies of women and the abuse and assaults they have suffered at the hands of men. And so we want to stop that happening, and we want to engage in helping people challenge catcalling, engage in challenging all forms of sexual assault and exploitation of women and girls.
Violence against women and girls is one of the most systematic and widespread human rights violations. 30% of women worldwide are estimated to have experienced at some point in their lives either physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence or sexual violence by a non-partner. In some countries, this figure goes up to 70%.
We want to work with schools. We do that through having an accreditation program, so that schools can ascribe and work towards White Ribbon's values. The reason we do it that way is because there are 2 staff at White Ribbon and a few volunteers like me, and we can't possibly get round 30,000 schools, and so we want to encourage the schools to do the work. So if we like, we have a program that they can join to show that they are taking the engagement of male students seriously. And sometimes I will go and give a talk to an individual school, but there's plenty of evidence to say that one-off interventions do not work. You need the involvement of the staff at the school, and you need a whole school approach so the whole school is involved in challenging their male students and challenging the culture.
What is that you think makes men to behave in such ways? Is it mental health issues, the first 7 years of childhood, alcoholism, home problems, lack of awareness, education?
Pick any of them and they're probably all contributors. Yes. Some of them that you've listed just there, I would say, are excuses for men's behaviour rather than reasons for men's behaviour. Drinking, for example. But socialisation, yeah, of course, people are socialised into a particular way of life, but you can socialise yourself out of that culture as well. You can learn to change your behaviours. Everything you do is a choice. Often a perpetrator will say, oh, well, my partner said this, did that, behaved this way, she made me do it. She didn't make you do anything. You did it of your own volition, and it's you who has to change your behaviour. So, I mean, we have, people talk horribly about toxic masculinity, and I think, yeah, the way we are socialised is not very clever, but it's very easy to join with other friends who aren't quite as macho as the people who you are worried about, and just learn to hang out with other people and to change your friends, change your behaviour.
Violence against women and girls is a complex issue that is rooted in gender inequality and discrimination, as well as unequal power relations between men and women, which exist in varying degrees across all communities in the world.
Well, first thing to do in terms of supporting survivors or supporting women generally is listen to them and then act upon what they say. In the same way that when people say, oh, I feel scared when men follow me home, give us space when you are out on a Saturday night. Do not follow too closely behind. Stop and let people walk away. Say, oh, I'm in a hurry. Just tough. Just give people space. So listen to women. Absolutely. And then we can learn what we need to do better. That's in the bottom line about how men can support survivors.
Thank you for listening. I'm Evelina Kirika, and you can find me on Twitter at Kirika Evelina. Tune in next week for another episode of The Social Post.